So let's take a few minutes to talk about Hadoop and some of the changes that have occurred in relationship to file replication. So we're going to talk about some of the basics of Hadoop and the way it treats files now. So here we're drawing out what they call nodes. See other videos on what a master node and a slave node and things of that nature are, but we're going to have 3 nodes within our system. And we're going to have a 3 terabyte drive. Now here we're drawing out the processor and the disk. They like to be close together in a Hadoop model. So Hadoop likes its storage right next to each other. So let's talk about some of these big things, right? These check marks, these things to remember about Hadoop file replication. So the Hadoop cluster actually replicates data within all of its nodes. So let's say that there's a 3 terabyte chunk of data. It's going to take and break that data up onto each node, a terabyte to each node. Node 1, 2, and 3 is illustrated here. It's going to take that and replicate it, and we can set within the Hadoop infrastructure, the framework of Hadoop, we can say replicate it to X amount of nodes. Typically, that node count is 3, so we can adjust that as needed. And it takes those block copies and moves them to the different nodes. Now, one thing to make sure of when you're building out this architecture is make sure that your switch supports block copies. All right, so make sure the switch fabric itself supports block copies, because that top of rack switch is going to communicate between those nodes. And Hadoop has kind of a cool feature that it will take and replicate. Let's say that you have these 3 nodes. Node 1 and 2, we'll draw a little line around it here, represented in rack 1, and node 3 is represented in rack 2. And so in rack 1, those nodes there, it's going to replicate. Remember, we said 3 copies. It's going to replicate first a duplicate, a second copy within its own rack to avoid the network congestion that may happen with lots of replication going on. And then the third node, it'll replicate to another rack. But again, all of it focuses down on the switch to make sure that top of rack switch is performing the way you need it to, so that all cluster members can have replicated data. And remember, again, one of the key points here is the disk is local on that server node, right? Processor and disk right there next to one another. And of course, we can define the number of copies that are being replicated within our environment. Now remember, one last thing before we go on this, Hadoop is a very scalable solution. So it can replicate to hundreds of thousands of nodes, allowing us to put nodes in, take nodes out. It's a very dynamic system. Please see other videos related to Hadoop and some of the great benefits that come along with this framework.